I'm going to be playing the M4 A1 FL10.
I'm in half, got in, paralyzed. Bucko Panthers! Everyone's like, yeah! He still wants us to win! I saw that movie Theory of Everything, that Stephen Hawking movie. It was really good, but it's kind of weird watching a movie where you already know what happens to the person. Because at the beginning of the movie, he's dancing around, having a good time, and you're like, ooh. He doesn't know. I didn't know that he was married for 30 years, and he had 3 kids with this woman, and then he ended up leaving her for another woman. That's pretty baller.
Yeah, it's possible
when you think about it, to be confined to a wheelchair, unable to talk, and still think to yourself,
this is my first game with this
I
tank.
can do better. This bitch is holding me back. Hey, can you set up the ramp so I can leave you? How did that exchange even go down is what I want to know. Like, normally when couples fight, it's this verbal ping pong match, like, fuck you.
I'm going to have to
you.
wait.
This woman just had her waited forever.
For it
She's like, what, you're going to leave me? Just wait for it.
And then restart the game.
You win some, you lose some. I want to tell these 2 stories about my dad before I get out of here. So, do you guys remember Independence Day when it came out, the first one? Will Smith? Yeah. So, they were doing this, like, Orson Welles War of the Worlds type promo for it. Like, Fox had it seem like aliens were invading Earth, and it looked real. They had, like, a whole newscast. And I saw it, and for some reason, I was just like, Dad, turn on the TV, quick! Channel 13! You know? And he turns it on, and then he's just like, locked in, you know? It's like trying to catch up on what I already know, you know? Aliens, okay. And then he's flipping the channels, and he's like, how come it's only on channel 13? I'm like, I don't know, they must have an exclusive or something. So, there's this iconic scene where, you know, the spaceship flies over the White House, and then the bay doors open up, and there's an electron charge, and then it blasts down, and then the White House just explodes into a million pieces. My dad's sitting on the edge of the bed. And he goes, what? Like, that was my dad's reaction to the end of the world. What? Not, I love you, son, we're gonna get through this somehow. At that moment, he didn't have kids or a wife. does this affect me? Another story. So I've been doing stand-up for a really long time now. Like, I started when I was 18, and like stand-up is not something that immigrant parents have their kids do. It's like I was doing heroin. Like, they weren't into it. We would get in shouting matches and everything, and my dad, he'd be like, "You're out there every night with the pimps and the prostitutes." Like, what comedy club are you going to? Some guy in a fur coat and a pimp can, like, here's some dice for you. So he would just like blow up every 3 months and just like these like shouting matches and everything. I'd be very secretive about my comedy. I would be writing spiral notebooks up in my bedroom. I'd be like, yeah, it'll be funny. And then my dad, I would hear his footsteps coming upstairs, and I would just like hide the notebook under my bed. And he'd be like, "What's going on in here?" I'd be like, "Just jerking off." Good. It's good. It's no jokes. Jerk all you. Just no jokes. Jerk all you want. So, the Apollo Theater amateur night on tour came to Seattle. They hit up different major cities. Seattle's one of the stops, and you could audition for it. And I went, I auditioned. I was like 19, I think, at the time. And I got in. Like, out of 342 people, I got in. 11 were selected. And they really liked me. They really liked my stuff. So I invited everybody. I invited my parents, teachers from school, just everybody came out. And then it came my turn to come out on stage, and I'm like, "Hey guys, my name's Fahim. It's an Afghan name." And it was kind of shortly after 9/11, probably not the best opener. So I'm like, "Yeah," and they were like, "Boo, boo, boo," just cascades of boos, like, "Boo," and the siren goes off, like, "Boo." The guy's tap dancing me off, and I'm like, I know how this works. Very surreal to get booed by that many people, And then the rest of the story I hear from my brother, because we took separate cars. Like, my family and myself, we took separate cars. So my brother tells me they're in the Dodge Caravan driving home. It's deathly silent. It's just my brother, my mom, my dad, my cousin Milo. No one's saying anything for like 30 minutes. And then my dad finally breaks the silence by going, "Well, there's no business like show business." Thank you so much for coming out tonight, guys. I really appreciate it. Thank you. Thanks for coming.
Del Monte Pineapple Juice in Family Size Super Pack helps keep you super healthy and happy. Del Monte Pineapple Juice in 1 liter Tetra.
But let's just jump into the first story, and I will read what USA Today has to say. USA Today reports Supreme Court dismisses Trump allies' challenge to Pennsylvania election. The Supreme Court refused today to stop Pennsylvania from finalizing President-elect Joe Biden's victory in the state, despite allegations from allies of President Donald Trump that the expansion of mail-in voting was illegal. I like how they say allies of President Donald Trump instead of just saying like Republicans or, you know, it's always got to be about Trump. The action by the nation's highest court, which includes 3 justices named by Trump, came as states across the country are locking in the results that will lead to next week's Electoral College vote. It represented the latest in a string of stinging judicial opinions that have left the president defeated both politically and legally. By their one-sentence denial, the justices left intact a ruling by the Pennsylvania Supreme Court, which said the challenge to a state law passed in 2019 came far too late. New Associate Justice Amy Coney Barrett appeared to have participated in the case. No dissents or recusals were noted. Led by conservative Rep. Mike Kelly, the challengers claimed the Republican-led state legislature's expansion of absentee voting violated the Pennsylvania Constitution. Rather than going to court after its passage, however, they waited until the state figured prominently in Trump's loss to Biden last month. All right, there's a lot to go through here. First off, I gotta clarify. The lawsuit didn't have anything to do with Trump directly. It wasn't filed by Trump people. It wasn't coming from the Trump campaign. Mike Kelly actually won his race, and it was noted by a lower court judge that they would likely win on the merits, and Mike Kelly would be negatively impacted by this in the event they do get some kind of relief. But first of all right, Will, just give me a general opinion so we can break this down and so I can better understand this. What does this mean? Are they saying that the case is done permanently, it's over, nothing's going to happen?
No, but they're saying that they've denied emergency injunctive relief, right? Basically, Parnell and Kelly, the 2 guys who were, you know, they lost at the Pennsylvania Supreme Court, and they want to get the Supreme Court of the United States to stop it. So they need to actually have an injunction as well before, you know, they have hearings and argument.
What would the injunction do?
The injunction would set things in, like, somehow stop what's happening, right? So maybe the injunction would stop the electors from being certified. I don't know if I think they might have already been certified.
I think they're already certified,
but it might have stopped them from going to the, you know, voting in the Electoral College or something like that. I mean, an injunction is just getting the court to order somebody to stop doing something and freeze things as they are.
So what I read was, there's a couple things. First, we have a lawsuit coming out of Texas, which we'll get to in a second, because this may be bigger. I think it is absolutely bigger, in your opinion?
I mean, at this point, it's certainly bigger because...
Oh, right. We'll get to that, but... So I heard something that said basically they denied emergency injunctive relief, but part of it has to do with the fact that Texas is asking for basically the same thing anyway.
I don't really think that that's the reason they denied here. I mean, I read the briefing from the state of Pennsylvania, and it was just good briefing, and it explained there were like 4 or 5 different independent procedural problems with the litigation as far as trying to get SCOTUS to do anything.
Yeah.
You know, first off, if you're going to, you know, SCOTUS doesn't want to consider issues for the first time. They want to see things resolved in the lower courts, and then they can sit as a court of review. The problem is it looks like that Kelly and Parnell and their lawyers didn't raise the sort of federal issue, the idea that it not just it would be a violation of the Pennsylvania Constitution, but also that it would be a violation of the federal Constitution.
No, they did. I think they did.
But not in the lower courts, I don't think.
Right.
Right? Like, they did that later, but they needed to raise that specific argument earlier. And because Pennsylvania never ruled on it, or nobody ever ruled on it, and Supreme Court itself would be the first people to consider that issue, they're like, whoa, we don't want to do this. And then there were the additional issues that have popped up elsewhere, standing, mootness.
Latches, is that what it's called?
Latches, right. So that's just undue delay in bringing your case.
So for those that aren't familiar, I think that's the biggest one. That's basically what they're ruling on. It basically says you have to reasonably bring your lawsuit, like reasonably within a certain amount of time. You can't just sit on it forever.
Right. And so I mean, this is a common theme in a lot of the election litigation that's been ruled on so far, is that there are these big procedural problems before you even get to the substantive questions about whether or not the scheme is unconstitutional in the first place. And so I really wasn't surprised by this news because I read the brief from Pennsylvania. I'm like, oh, wow, you didn't raise the federal question in district court or in Pennsylvania at all. They're just going to not hear your case because they don't want to deal with it.
And that's really interesting because when you look at the mainstream media's coverage of this, it essentially is Trump is done, it's over. Yahoo News has an interesting headline here. They have an article that says Supreme Court shuts down Trump campaign's last-ditch Pennsylvania appeal. So they're making
It's
it
not
sound
even coming
like
from the
it's
Trump
done.
campaign.
Well, that's what they're saying on Yahoo
So
News.
that's what I bring up here in this USA Today article. They say that what was the exact quote? They said basically that it was too late because they waited until the state figured prominently in Trump's loss. Nowhere in this does it say Trump lost, therefore, or anything having to do with Trump.
Right.
And we had Sean Parnell on, one of the plaintiffs, and he said he didn't know. He didn't know at all that it was unconstitutional. They all thought the law was constitutional, and now they're suing because they found out it wasn't.
So, I mean, there's a question about whether or not the Pennsylvania Supreme Court correctly applied their laches doctrine, right? But the problem is, you know, laches is an issue of state law. It's not a federal law issue.
Right.
And then ultimately, the Pennsylvania Supreme Court is the final arbiter of what Pennsylvania law is. And so that's why, you know, they have to figure out how is this possibly a federal question and get
And they
very
didn't
creative.
raise it initially.
Yeah.
Okay, so I just discovered something interesting. This video is about crew books. I just discovered something interesting about crew books. This is a premium tank. I have the crew here, which is trained for this premium tank because the Italian tech tree does not exist yet. And I thought that these booklets and training guides could only be used on regular tanks because when you use them on premium tanks, it says that the crew is not trained for the specialization. But it ends up you can use them on premium tanks. It's just that the crew has to be trained for that premium tank. So it looks like this is my first crew. They haven't played a game yet. I just recruited them. They're going to get plus 69, which is what these four ladies all are going to get. They're going to get the plus 69. And I am probably going to give the 850 to this one here. She's really going to be kicked up into, wow, she hasn't even played a game. Look how many skills she has. She's already got 5 skills. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. I would use either recon or concealment. If it were a light tank, I would definitely use recon because you want to prioritize spotting when you play light tanks. I'm going to use concealment. And then I'll do repairs and firefighting afterwards. Okay, so that's a little tip you can use with crew books.
Exactly. It was sort of like a last-minute audible of like, oh, we actually need to go to the U.S. Supreme Court. How do we do that? And it's like it's way too late. You need to have kind of anticipated this potential problem and this path at the very
Do you remember what their federal argument was? Because it's in there.
Yeah. So the federal argument goes something along the lines of because there's the electors clause in the federal Constitution delegates the power to run your elections in a certain way to the legislature. And then that's also sort of incorporated.
Every journey must start somewhere. What follow are the little steps to become.
The lawmaking process with the Constitution, et cetera. That if the Pennsylvania courts and the Pennsylvania government is somehow violating their own procedures, then that creates a federal question because it's a violation of somehow that delegation of power.
But they didn't bring that up early.
They didn't bring it up early enough to get, at least that's probably what I think is the reason here, right? The Supreme Court didn't say why it refused to review it, just give a one-sentence denial.
Right.
But my guess is that this is the big reason.
So what you're saying is that you're a better lawyer. They should have hired you because you would have won. I'm half kidding.
I'm not saying any of that. I don't even actively practice right now. I run a conservative magazine. If you're hiring me to do your litigation right now, you're probably making a mistake. But if you want to pay my rate, that's
Did you see
fine.
the lower court's opinion on the merits?
I mean, I
That they
saw
would
the
win?
Pennsylvania Supreme Court's opinion. It was
narrow.
Yeah, it was very narrow. I wasn't impressed by it, but that's the thing about being a Supreme Court. Like, I think there was some famous justice once who said, "We're not final because we're right," or something like, "We're right because we're final." In the sense of
Right.
like because we are the
There's
court of
nowhere
last
else to
resort,
go.
that means we're right.
So the claim was that mail-in voting violated the Constitution because it already has an absentee voting provision.
Violated the Pennsylvania Constitution.
Pennsylvania Constitution, right. And the first judge did issue an injunction, and then when it got appealed to the Supreme Court, she issued then an opinion saying, here's why I did it, and they will likely win if it's ruled on the merits. But then the Supreme Court said, nah, you're too late, bye-bye.
Yeah, and they didn't even consider the federal question or any of the questions about the actual substantive constitutionality of the statute. And they just kind of get away with it. I mean, in this case, it's one of those situations where, you know, the Pennsylvania Supreme Court there's elections for, I think, the sitting justices. I think it's a very, very partisan court. And so it's not surprising to me that they end up in this really bad spot. And then, you know, so it's not surprising the Pennsylvania Supreme Court was really partisan and didn't handle this case fairly. And then it's not surprising they didn't get to go to SCOTUS with it because I don't feel like they were prepared for that particular avenue.
But does this create a problem that, like, I mean, give me what's your opinion? Do you think it's unconstitutional what they did with mail-in voting?
Oh, I mean, and as according to the text of the Pennsylvania Constitution, yeah. I mean, the Pennsylvania Constitution says here are the rules for regulating absentee ballots, and these are the only circumstances where you can do it. And Pennsylvania didn't amend its constitution; they just passed legislation.
So are we now going to, and based on other challenges in other states, potentially have a president gets elected because of unconstitutional elections, and the rest of America has to just accept that?
I mean, you know, this is one of the things that I think people, you know, remember the tweet I did that got everybody angry, where I was like, Joe Biden won, he didn't win fair and square, but like, we need to get ready for that. You know, I mean, history is full of instances where people very famous people won elections via cheating and took office, and there wasn't like some later remedy to it. We just knew they cheated. In
that case, why shouldn't Trump use any and all means to retain the presidency?
I mean, I just don't want to have a military coup, man. I really don't. I think that down that road leads all sorts of terrible things. So I think, you know, to me, a lot of the problem here starts with the year before the election, where the Democrats are going around the country and weakening voter integrity measures all over the country.
And they should have stopped it.
And we needed to do a better job of stopping it. That's where we lost it.
Yeah, but like regular Americans don't know. That's not their job. I'm not going to ask a plumber to understand how to file a lawsuit in advance.
Right.
So do you remember when the Trump campaign sued over ballot observers?
Yeah.
Did you see what the judge said about observation? That as long as they're in the room, then that satisfies election law?
I mean, it shouldn't, right?
That's crazy, right?
But like, I mean, here's a real problem. The Pennsylvania legislature agreed to all these reforms to ballot processing. They agreed to universal mail-in. They agreed to a bunch of stuff.
So, but technically, what they agreed to it. What they've said is that we didn't realize they would do a whole bunch of crazy things like the curing process and the extended deadlines, and that's what they just rolled with after the fact. I think that's part of the Texas lawsuit, which, again, we're going to get to in a second. But what's crazy to me about the ruling from the judge on the Trump campaign is that, on the Trump campaign lawsuit, so Trump sued, his campaign sued, like Rudy Giuliani was arguing, I guess, saying that 682,000 ballots were counted without observers having meaningful access. Meaning, the observers are supposed to look at the ballots to make sure that what the counter is saying is correct.
Right.
But they kept them, like 100 feet away so they couldn't see anything.
Yeah.
And then the judge said, how many were in the building? The Trump campaign lawyer, I think, said very famously a non-zero number of observers were in the building.
Yeah.
But they didn't have meaningful access. And then the judge basically said, well, the election code says observers have to be there. The observers were there. It doesn't specify distance. Therefore, the code's requirements were satisfied.
I mean, to me, that's somehow law and justice don't always correlate, right? Like, that sounds like the judge is looking at the law and saying, here's the rules. Well, the rules are these people need to be in the building. Doesn't anticipate any sort of.
But isn't a judge supposed to solve that problem? That's insane.
That's actually not what judges are supposed to do, right? Judges are supposed to apply the law. Right?
Well, hold on. I had a conversation with multiple lawyers about the gender issue in New York City, right?
Yeah.
So have you ever looked at the New York City human rights gender issues?
I can't say I'm super familiar with New York City in particular.
They have codified 31 genders.
Okay.
But their New York City recognizes any and all that anyone might assert.
Okay.
And they say that in all public accommodations, they must adhere to these practices, essentially, if you use a specific name. And so I had a question about the extreme nature by which this law exists. So and this is relevant. Everyone just hear me out. This makes sense. So the idea was, if I can say my name is anything, and I can wear any clothes and use any pronouns. I should be able to go into a Starbucks or go to a job. I can get hired at a job and then show up wearing whatever I want and say, here's my name, say it, or else, right? And they say that a willful refusal to use someone's preferred name or pronoun is a violation, a human rights violation of $250,000, which will warrant a $250,000 fine. So I talked to multiple lawyers about this, and I said, I'm going to give you an extreme hypothetical. I'm going to take the letter of the law to the extreme degree. What if I dressed up in a very, very offensive way and said that my gender was, insert racial slur gender, and that my official name was a racial slur? They said that the courts would laugh you out and say, no way, we'll never uphold that. But if the law literally says, so here's my argument. If the law...
Iba-iba man ang timpla, kaya gawin ng Nescafe Classic at Coffee Mate. Tikman na!
Law says I can use any name and dress any way I want, why couldn't I go to Starbucks dressed like a giant Pac-Man and say I'm Pac gender or whatever? And I'm not trying to disparage anybody. I'm saying if the law isn't specific, couldn't it create this exploit?
I mean, I'd just be less pessimistic than the other lawyers you've talked to, right? I mean, obviously, wouldn't guarantee that a judge would act on it or see the law your way. But my view is, I mean, if their law is really that vaguely written, oftentimes you get results in court that people think defy common sense. I mean, so it depends. Sometimes the judge is going to do common sense anyway. Some judges are more active. Some judges are more like strictly literalist in how they read the law. It's just
the reason why I bring that up is, people could exploit this to make money, obviously.
Yeah.
But the idea is, when it comes to New York City and the human rights law, if a judge can determine that my gender is laughable, like if you clearly pick something ridiculous meant to garner laughs, and the judge does, then why would any other judge not be allowed to throw out any legitimate claim about, trans human rights violations?
Sure, and that's exactly the reason why they might, why I probably would end up disagreeing with the lawyers you previously talked to.
So you could actually get a job at Starbucks, show up the next day dressed like Pac-Man and say your name's Pac-Man, and if they tell you no, get out, you can't wear that, you can challenge them.
I mean, based on how you've characterized that law to me, yes, right. I mean,
it is really that big. It says gender identity is self-expression.
Yeah, there's definitely a lot of laws in New York City. There's also a very specific law against people's hair. So if you discriminate against someone's hair or hairstyle, you also could be fined as a business $250,000
right, yes.
for doing so.
Okay, so not to get off track.
Okay.
The reason I bring it up is because now I'm hearing, and again, different lawyers, different opinions, is no, it's the letter of the law. The judge just says, here's the letter of the law, we're done.
I mean, it depends on the judge. Like, not all
Right.
judges act the same way. Some
Well, so-
judges are more...
Do you think a judge should say the law is clearly intended to make sure you can observe the ballot reasonably? Like,
I kind of don't, actually. I mean, I think that's the kind of thing that needs to be dealt with by a legislative fix, because I generally think that the way these things should work procedurally is, judges just apply the law as written in the best reading of it, and then the legislature tweaks the law if the law is stupid.
but think about the problem that creates. It's like we say, okay, we want observers to be able to read the votes, so we know there's scrutiny and the votes are legit. And then someone finds a loophole and just exploits and abuses it. So then we have an entire election that is essentially not the will of the people in any capacity because it was exploited.
Right. Well, I mean, then that question becomes like, okay, well, is there some other restriction or some other like law or right that's being compromised here, and maybe that comes into play to say to constrain the way that the specific election code can be interpreted, right? So, but you need to be appealing to something else. You can't just say, well, the law doesn't make any sense, so we should toss the law. Like that usually is not something lawyers look at.
Or the judge just says, I think very clearly, the interpretation of the law is such that people can actually observe what is written on the ballot.
I mean,
Not just to say, well, there's no official foot number in the law, so therefore, I mean, he quite literally said you could be sitting in the bathroom in the other room of the building, and it counts as having an observer present.
I would argue that
clearly
if
makes
they
no
can't
sense.
see it and they're not observing it, then they're not observers, and therefore there are no observers.
right. Well, but then very likely in the statute is also a definition of who counts as an observer and who doesn't, right? Like that's very common for most of these election statutes, is to have some sort of definitions portion where the phrases and words they use, so that might constrain that sort of. I mean, it's good. It's creative lawyering. Don't get me wrong, but it's that would be probably precluded by a definition.
So their official job title is observer, but they're not actually observing.
Yeah.
Exactly. So the judge said, well, they're called observers, and they can be sitting in the back of the room playing on their phone, playing Candy Crush, and that counts as having an observer present.
It's bad law. I don't know what else to say. I think that
Yeah.
pretty clearly Pennsylvania has really bad election codes. that make a mockery of election integrity that need to be changed. Now, but if you're asking me like straight up, do I think that Pennsylvania judge made some sort of was in legal error the way he interpreted the statute? Doesn't sound like it.
Right, yeah.
You know, sounds like he just interpreted the law and applied it.
That's crazy to me.
I mean, but that's
Because how could you anticipate that as a regular person? You could go through every law and make sure, okay, we're going to have, I want to make sure nobody cheats, nobody plays any unethical games. How would you predict a judge is going to be like, well, you know, observers don't mean actually observing the name on the ballot, it just means being there?
I mean, I don't know, like there was, I feel like there was, in Georgia, they've lessened their restrictions. I mean, COVID probably pushed them further away. I'm sure, you know, poll observers have been around for a pretty long time. So you'd feel like it was one of the better developed areas of law, but apparently Pennsylvania is just...
There's always something. Thanks for checking out this clip from the Timcast IRL podcast. We do the show live, Monday through Friday at 8 p.m., so come back to check us out when we go live. Don't forget to subscribe, hit the like button, hit the notification bell, and we are also available on all podcast platforms for free if you want to listen to us there. Thanks for hanging out, and we will see you all next time.
Bill O'Reilly here, Wednesday, December 9th, 2020. You are listening to the O'Reilly Update. Here's what's happening today in America. Texas sues to help President Trump. The Supreme Court rejects Republican efforts to overturn the results in Pennsylvania. Joe Biden reveals his three-part COVID plan. New York deploys a so-called mask squad to enforce lockdown laws.
Or maybe as long as
Alcohol sales jumped 60% since COVID came to town. Also had the latest decision over the presidential vote. But first, Texas Attorney General Ken Paxton filing a lawsuit to overturn the 2020 election results in Pennsylvania, Georgia, Michigan, and Wisconsin. The very unusual challenge asks the Supreme Court to declare any electoral votes cast for Joe Biden as, quote, unconstitutional and illegitimate because of alleged illegal early voting in those battleground states. In another big case, the Supreme Court refused to hear a Republican lawsuit in Pennsylvania. The justice is rejecting a case to dismiss hundreds of thousands of mail-in ballots. The court issued a one-sentence decision with no dissent, saying, quote, the application for injunctive relief presented by Justice Alito and referred to him by the court and referred to him to the court is declined. Joe Biden releasing his plan to combat the virus in the first 100 days of his administration. The proposal emphasizes masks, vaccinations, and reopening schools, but as usual, the vice president is short on specifics. New York Governor Cuomo sending members of the health department into the streets of New York. It's called the Mask Squad, and it's supposed to enforce COVID restrictions and stop folks from gathering in big groups. Well, since New York cannot even control violent crime, confidence in this effort is low. Unhappy Americans are turning to the bottle to cope with things. Sales of alcoholic beverages up 60% since March. Most popular drinks in November, tequila, vodka, beer, and wine. Online purchases of spirits up 340% in the last 6 months. New York City leading the nation in drinking. In a moment, does President Trump have any chance of staying in the White House? Right back. Time now for the O'Reilly Update message of the day. The Supreme Court will not hear a lawsuit asking for mail-in votes in Pennsylvania to be thrown out. As we reported, the decision was released in a terse, word of the day, terse fashion. Basically, they were quoting Bush the Elder, not gonna hear it. Nevada's highest court said the same thing. There is an active voting fraud lawsuit in Arizona at the Supreme Court there, the state court, And Texas now asking the federal Supreme Court to invalidate votes in Pennsylvania, Georgia, Michigan, and Wisconsin, as we just reported. But the Supreme Court will say the same thing. No. Why? Well, I've been reporting since the vote and the allegations of fraud, and by the way, I do believe there was fraud in the election. I don't know how much fraud, but I do believe 6 places, Atlanta, Georgia, Philadelphia, Pennsylvania, Detroit, Michigan, Wayne County, Milwaukee, Wisconsin, Clark County, Las Vegas, Nevada, were compromised, mostly by mail-in ballots. That is my belief based upon our investigation at BillO'Reilly.com and reading affidavits and seeing with my own eyes how votes turned around in a very strange way. However, nobody is saying there wasn't any fraud. There was, and everybody knows it. What the courts are ruling is, number one, we don't have jurisdiction to make a judgment. Or number two, it doesn't rise, the fraud doesn't rise high enough to invalidate a vote. That's what's going on. But underneath the legalisms is one simple fact. Most judges, and all of them on the Supreme Court, all 9, do not want to overturn an election. They don't care who the candidates are. They don't want to usurp the so-called will of the people. And if you are going to get their attention, you must bring in incontrovertible evidence. Well, how do you get that evidence? 2 ways. Forensic examinations of the actual voting machines. We have been told that in many places, Dominion voting machines were compromised. Okay, you've got to take that hardware into a site, and federal agents have got to see, and they can, whether there was any manipulation of any voting machine. That's called forensics. You've seen it on TV. The second thing that has to be done, and should be done, is analytics. So say Wayne County, Michigan, Detroit, voted 90% for Joe Biden. What did the adjacent county do? And how did the mail-in votes stack? You can do those analytics, and that provides you with a strong piece of circumstantial evidence. Neither of those things have been done. They should be. I'm Bill O'Reilly, and I approve that message by writing it. Disagree? I'd like to hear from you, Bill at BillO'Reilly.com. And please consider my new book, Killing Crazy Horse. Great gift. In a moment, something you might not know. Now, the O'Reilly Update brings you something you might not know. The COVID epidemic has infected more than 67 million people in every country on the planet, killing at least 1.5 million since March. Thankfully, doctors believe the contagion can now be contained because of the vaccine. A similar scientific breakthrough happened back in 1979 when a team of scientists finally eradicated one of history's worst plagues, smallpox. That virus was first recorded by the ancient Egyptians. People developed red skin, then lesions all over their bodies. The illness killed 40% of its victims within 36 hours back then, most from internal bleeding. The disease spread throughout the Roman Empire, ultimately infecting every place discovered on Earth. British exploration took smallpox global in the 18th century. Benjamin Franklin lost his own son to the contagion. While impossible to know the true number of fatalities associated with smallpox, by the 1950s, there was an astounding 50 million confirmed diagnoses every year. Despite some success in treating smallpox, researchers estimate the plague killed 500 million people in the 20th century alone. 500 million. By 1959, a team of researchers were close to getting a vaccine, but it wasn't really developed until 1967. The last known case of smallpox occurred in Africa in 1977. In total, it took a worldwide effort more than 20 years to develop a vaccine. This year, doctors formulated a vaccine for COVID in less than 9 months. That's almost a miracle. And here's something else you might not know. Smallpox is one of the few viruses in history to be used in biological warfare. The British military deployed the disease against the French and their Native American allies at the siege of Fort Pitt back in 1763. That's now modern-day Pittsburgh. Soldiers intentionally laced clothing and blankets with smallpox, then distributed the items through spies. And that happened in the West as well, as Indian tribes were given infected blankets. I chronicle that in my book, Killing Crazy Horse. Back after this. Thank you for listening to the O'Reilly Update. I am Bill O'Reilly. No spin, just facts, and always looking out for you.
So Health Agent Bill Richmond is not here because, listen, if there are legal issues afoot, sometimes he can't be here because but he's not gone. He's going to be here tomorrow. Right. I can't say if there is or there isn't any legal issues, but speaking of which, huge announcement from YouTube. Yesterday, this is from YouTube, we can bring this up, was the safe harbor deadline for the U.S. presidential election, and enough states have certified their election results to determine a president-elect. Given that, we will start removing any piece of content uploaded today or any time after that misleads people by alleging that widespread fraud or errors change the outcome of the 2020 presidential election. In line with our approach towards historical U.S. presidential elections, for example, we will remove videos claiming that a presidential candidate won the election due to widespread software glitches or counting errors. That's such specificity. We will begin enforcing this policy today and will ramp up in the weeks to come. As always, news coverage and commentary on these issues can remain on our site if there's sufficient education, documentary, scientific, or artistic context. Well, get ready for sufficient context, YouTube, because it's a Supreme Court case, a landmark Supreme Court case. I'm sorry, I know yesterday was wholesome with the kid and Santa Claus, but this is my livelihood, it's everyone's livelihood here. We're about to talk about Chinese influence in U.S. elections, by the way. Foreign interference, and also let's be clear that the big tech companies have been they've been complicit in silencing protesters of the Chinese. Is that racist? I don't really think so. I don't think Chinese communists? No. It's an abbreviation. Short. Like you have to say Pakistani, you can't say Paki. But you know what? I mean no affront. Paki is just short because I want to spend more time talking with the Pakis I love. Time is precious. So I don't know what's going to happen with this today, but I want the best thing you can do right now before we get to the news is if you're watching this, comment. Just comment right now on YouTube. Comment, tell YouTube to go screw themselves, and you can post your information regarding the election. Of course, we will have sufficient sources. I don't know if the actual Supreme Court of the United States suffices YouTube. But let's be clear. President-elect, no. The disputes have not been resolved. This is the rule.
Yeah, exactly.
There are disputes in these states. You cannot say that the election is over. No. And listen, I am not going to stop pointing, of course, no conspiracies, not conjecture. Everything we do, we try and source. It's available at lottoofcutter.com. Hit the description. But you know what? People say, why are you fighting a losing battle? You may be right. I'm not going to believe it until Joe Biden himself drools his sorry little hair-plugged ass down those stairs as the president. Until then, no. Yeah. I'm not going along with it, and there's a lot to get to.
Yeah, and so it's funny that YouTube would have to include a sentence at the end of that paragraph that says, we will allow news, and there wasn't a period right after that. Right. News, as long as it has this, because they had to give themselves an out to block even news from posting these videos.
We will allow news? Okay, stop.
Yeah, full stop.
That's not, you'll allow news, that's it. I know that you want to say something else, but you don't want to say something else because you're about to make a mistake, you're going to make some wrong decisions, and you feel like you're good in your wrong decisions, but okay, news, stop. And then, no, stop, news!
Well, after Trump was inaugurated, there were lots of people challenging the result of the 2016 election. Right. I don't recall a similar statement from YouTube 4 years ago.
Yeah. And they've been on for several years.
Right, yeah, I would think so.
We'll go back and look, just in case we're wrong.
Yeah, I don't know exactly how many states are filing suit right now with the Supreme Court against these other states, but some might argue that's relevant. More relevant than during a time where Al Gore wanted to count this county but not that county and this county in 37 days in Florida. Only 3 counties. And George Bush, what about all the counties? No. Just 3 counties.
Yeah.
This is a little bit of a bigger deal than that.
Yeah.
Let's get to the election updates while we're talking about this, because YouTube is using the safe harbor thing as though it's safe harbor for them.
Right.
It's not. It doesn't mean anything.
Surprise!
It doesn't mean it's the deadline. Let's be clear. It doesn't mean that it's the deadline for disputes. All right. It was just a deadline for states to certify their results. But obviously, if there's widespread irregularities, are we okay with that? That you can still dispute it because we don't actually have a new president yet.
Right.
We have a current president. Giuliani released a statement. The safe harbor deadline is a statutory timeline that generally denotes the last day for states to certify the election results. However, it is not unprecedented. Okay, for election contests to last well beyond December 8th. The only fixed day in the United States Constitution is the inauguration of president on January 20th at noon. Oh! You're gonna fact check that, YouTube? Have fun. So
We're still up.
We're still up. Good. We are still up. Texas filed a lawsuit. For people who don't know, Texas filed a lawsuit that has now been docketed to the Supreme Court against Georgia, Michigan, Pennsylvania, Wisconsin, and the basis for the case is exploiting COVID-19 to justify ignoring federal and state election laws. And by the way, that's actually a really good thing that Texas is doing this. The Supreme Court, obviously, I think we have, I don't know if we did that overlay from the actual Supreme Court so that you guys know this is real. Did you guys do that overlay?
Yep.
Okay,
Yeah,
perfect.
yeah,
All right. Sorry, guys, I have a little monitor, and my eyes are strained from tears of anger. Is that a thing?
I think you can cry in anger.
I was crying blood.
Oh boy.
That's not a good sign.
Just have that stressed Eric vein in my forehead. Texas is the perfect state to start this case because they were the ones who refused to allow Dominion to be used in their election because of security issues, which, by the way, was echoed by many Democrats, including Elizabeth Warren. And you know she really wishes she hadn't done that now.
She's going back scrubbing all the videos that she can.
It shouldn't be a political issue, but Texas is taking this to the Supreme Court. Other states are joining in. I'll get to that in a second. The low estimate is 4 or 5, and I've heard from inside sources as high as 10.
Wow.
But it hasn't. They have not all necessarily confirmed.
Yeah, so yesterday, whenever I saw that the Pennsylvania case was getting kicked back, that the Supreme Court wasn't going to take it up, I was very disappointed because the entire time that we've been talking about this, I felt like the strongest case was they broke their own laws for elections. That was the case that we would have to make against them. Texas stepping up and saying, look, as other states, we're not going to allow you to just break your laws and do whatever you want and rig an election by doing so. That's news. If that happened, that is rigging an election, right, for one purpose or another. And so I'm really very excited that Texas is going to do this, and I hope that Ted Cruz does the same thing that he did for the Pennsylvania case and says, hey, if it goes before the Supreme Court, I would happily go and argue for the state of Texas if it gets before the Supreme Court.
Right. Can we lobby Beto to argue the other side? I don't know. I know that probably it doesn't work that way.
Yeah.
But I would like him to just skateboard in, like, the defense rests, bogus!
He can only take one butt kicking a decade, so he'll have to wait a little while.
Well, no, but he's going to be your gun czar, so...
No.
Stock up!
Watch Good Morning Mug Club live every Monday through Thursday at 10:15 Eastern.
What's up, Hawaii? How you guys doing? People don't know boundaries in Hawaii, man. You guys are too cool. Cause I was walking on the beach with my girl, and I got weird colored eyes. It's a weird thing from my dad. Anyways, so the sun's in my eyes, and this dude is holding hands with my girl, and this dude's walking towards me with his girl, and he's walking and he leans in. I don't know this guy, and he goes, "Hey, dog, what color are your eyes?" Weird question. Caught me off guard. I just said the truth. I was like, hazel, which is the softest thing you could say as a man. Hazel, it just doesn't sound tough. Not like I need to be tough, but hazel, that's fuck. Like, why? The only way that can be any softer is if I say, oh, it just depends on the way the sunlight hits them. Like, I'm in my 30s, man. I'm trying to become a man. I had my become a man moment. Recently, I lived with my girl in Vancouver, and she called me 1 a.m., right? She was nervous in her voice. I heard it, and I was like, what's wrong, babe? What's wrong? She goes, stepped out of the shower, and I looked in the window. There was a dude looking at me from the window, and I was like, do you know him? Dumb question. I watch a lot of cop shows. How long has he been there? She goes, 15 minutes. I was like, shit. This guy's a professional. right? And I was like, what do you want me to do? You want me to come home? You want me to come where you at? He goes, yeah. I go, I'm on my way right now. And I hung up. Then I totally forgot about it. For like 5 minutes, I was high. So I was like, whatever, so I was like, oh shit, I gotta go. So I'm driving there. I didn't have a whip, I had a wrench in the back seat. That's all I got. So I'm driving up, he's still there, and the man shit comes out of me, and I just jump out, I go, hey, what the fuck you doing looking at my girl in the window? And I'm shooting the wrench. Like bullets are coming out of it. And he's dodging like, don't shoot. I run at him, and I hit him in the ribs with the wrench. I didn't know I had that move. I didn't know I'd do that. So if you fuck with me, I will likely agitate your ribs. You've been warned. So I hit him. I go, man, what the hell you doing at the window, man? It's my girl's window, man. Get the hell away from the window. And he turned around and said something I did not see coming. He goes, hey, dog. Sorry, man. I didn't know that was your girl. Like, he said it so cool, almost said, man, why didn't you say so? Like we almost went out for drinks after. He was cool as shit. He was a cool-ass creep. I had to remind myself he was girl, like, nah, man, you a creep, man. You've been doing this to other girls. I'm gonna take your picture. He goes, fuck that, and he runs, because why not? I chase him, because I'm in too deep. But I didn't know it was my girl had called the cops, right? She didn't tell him who was who. So we're chasing him, we're running there, and then the cop pulls up. We stop, me and the creep, cop jumps out, he's confused. He doesn't want to guess wrong. So he's like, shit. Who's the boyfriend? And I said, right here. He's like, who's the creep? He's like, right over here. Cool ass dude, right? Cool ass creep. And he goes, drop the weapon. I was like, oh shit, they think this is a weapon. I like kneel down, I put the wrench down, I closed my eyes, I was like, okay, this is where I die. I wasn't shot, and I opened my eyes, and I was like, oh shit, I'm not shot. And I looked up, and I saw his badge, and I never went from being more terrified to grateful that I was in Vancouver, Canada, when this shit happened. Because from then on, it was a delightful experience. Oh, the cop came over, put a blanket on me, walked me down the alley like it was the end of Die Hard. Right? They was like, brought me some tea. I'm like, you need someone to talk to? It's like, yeah, that shit was scary, man. He was like, what color are your eyes? That's my time, guys. Thank you so much.
It isn't fair. I don't want to be an outcast. I'm not hearing that. Mr. Hanky?
Howdy ho! Howdy ho, pal. Gosh, you're looking swell.
Go away, Mr. Hanky.
You know something, pal? You smell an awful lot like flowers.
I said go away. My dad says you aren't real.
Not real? Well, shucks, if I weren't real, could I sing this jolly Christmas song? Santa Claus is on his way, he's loaded goodies on his sleigh. Drop them off on Christmas Day, and I'll say howdy-ho!
Mr. Hanky, shh, I'll give you trouble.
Folks will gather around the fire, sing a song from a choir. Pretty soon they'll all retire, and I'll say howdy-ho!
Kyle, what are you doing in there?
Nothing!
Open this door!
I hope the Santa Claus will send everyone.
Kyle! Say something, Mr. Hanky.
So let me ask you, is this the end for Donald Trump?
It's not the end, but it forecloses, one hopeful path. I think, I think there are basically two viable paths we're going to get.
Let's do it. Okay, Texas. From CNBC, Texas sues 4 battleground states and Supreme Court over unlawful election results in 2020 presidential race. Texas Republican Attorney General Ken Paxton on Tuesday filed a lawsuit in the U.S. Supreme Court to invalidate presidential election results in Pennsylvania, Georgia, Wisconsin, and Michigan. The lawsuit asserts that unlawful election results in those 4 states which President-elect Joe Biden won should be declared unconstitutional. The filing argues that those states used the coronavirus pandemic as an excuse to unlawfully change their election rules. Experts in election law were quick to dismiss the likelihood of a 9 Supreme Court justice taking the case. Now I'm gonna poke your buttons a little bit and say Joe Biden is not the president-elect, but
that's fine.
But he's not, right?
Yeah, no, like technically not. I mean,
no, literally not, but technically is. In order to be literally, to be.
Is this like a bugaboo of yours?
No. Well, no, because you tweeted that Joe Biden was president-elect, right?
No, I tweeted that Joe Biden won.
Okay, well, you said it earlier, so I'm just making the point to clarify for everybody what it means.
Okay.
President-elect is January 6th, when all the votes are counted and they say he will now be inaugurated, in 14 days or whatever, in 2 weeks. That's when he is president-elect officially because we go by the Electoral College. Technically, he is because everybody recognizes the projections from all the states, and thus it's going to happen anyway. So it's they consider it an inevitability, right? Okay, so let's talk about Texas.
Okay, let's talk about Texas.
All right. Is this Trump? He's guaranteed to win now. It's over. Trump won.
No. I mean, this is a very interesting thing. Like, I had to learn. I read about it today because I was like, "Whoa!" I mean, this is something you remember from your common law class as like a footnote. That, by the way, when states sue each other, they go straight to the Supreme Court. But it's not something that comes up very often. I think I looked into it. There's been an average of 1 case like this every year, per year for like the last 100 years, and out of all the cases that the Supreme Court takes.
So, like, states routinely sue other states?
Well, the point is, it's not routine. Like, one case like this every year happens.
Oh, wow.
Out of like 75 or 100 or 150 that the Supreme Court takes. So it's not. It happens, and it's usually designed for things like water rights.
Like Wisconsin and Illinois or something.
Yeah, right.
I mean, they have the Great Lakes Coalition though, so they're all pretty much in agreement. But it would be like I remember there was Arizona suing the Great Lakes, saying we deserve access to the water because it's on American soil or whatever.
And that was like the original idea behind the Supreme Court was you had to have a place where the states could resolve their disputes.
What's this lawsuit about? What are they suing on?
So they're suing, and they're basically saying Pennsylvania, Michigan, Wisconsin, etc., all didn't follow their own election laws, all made a mockery of election integrity. As a result, that injures us, the state of Texas, not just because our electors don't get to vote for president and it's canceled out by these illegitimate, unconstitutional votes, but also, even more important, from the state perspective, in terms of its own interests, the vice presidency is now changed, and we're a state. We have a direct interest in our Senate representation and our ability to vote there, and the vice president is the president of the Senate who breaks ties.
Right.
So they're saying, like, look, we have standing to object here. There are all these problems, and you should take this. And actually, we think you, the Supreme Court, don't have the discretion. We think you have to take this case. And then going through the litany of problems that we've been talking about elsewhere.
They said SCOTUS has to take it.
They argued that. Doesn't look like it's a majority view on the Supreme Court. It looks like it's just Alito and Thomas. Although we don't know how the 3 latest justices would rule on it. That said, I am doubtful, but not like. I don't think it's a guaranteed or anything, but I'm doubtful that the Supreme Court will take this case, and it kind of gets to the heart of, what does the Supreme Court normally do? It does appeals, right? Again, it sits as a court of review. When the case comes to it in the first instance, the Supreme Court's like, well, I guess we have to have like a trial or something, right? Like we need to have evidence, we need to have witnesses. And how they actually do that is they literally just appoint basically a special master, which is like a private judge. And they're like, oh, I guess we have one of those cases we have to take. Well, here you go, private judge, go resolve it, and we'll deal with this later.
And then after everything's presented, they can rule on what.
Right. But because they're not equipped for it, they've kind of found ways to say, like, okay, how do we like not take these cases if we don't have to, right? Like we're an appeals court, we don't like to decide things. Okay, and if they can't, then fine, we'll take it. But if they can, with other litigants in a forum, so that things go normally and percolate their way up, then we'll do that. This is one of those cases where there are other forums where the underlying interests being talked about in the lawsuit can be vindicated. There are election contest laws in all these states, which is actually one of the avenues we haven't really talked about, where I think there's a real chance of doing something and persuading a judge.
So what is that?
So for example, in Georgia, President Trump and David Schaefer, the director of Georgia Republicans, filed a formal election contest in Georgia State Court under Georgia's election contest law.
What was that?
That was like 2 days ago.
Is that still going?
Yeah, that's still going. They just filed. I think on the 5th. Or
but doesn't that play into safe harbor somehow? Like they've got to resolve that dispute?
I don't know how how it interplays with State Harbor, but I just know that like it's the first lawsuit I saw where I was like, oh, there isn't an obvious procedural problem with this, right? That's going to prevent this from getting heard,
right?
And that's going to lead to a judge just kicking it out of court, because that's been the problem with all the lawsuits so far. Like the other side gets up and says, "Oh, you have no standing and mootness," and like going down the list of like problems with your lawsuit that we don't even get to the substance.
Or some of them are just, I don't know, the Kraken lawsuits.
I mean, the Kraken lawsuits got dismissed yesterday. I mean, one of them got dismissed from the bench, which you never see.
Like that's how bad it was, or what?
Yeah, I mean, because normally, I mean, a district judge is worried about being reversed on appeal. It's humiliating. It's your superiors telling you publicly. Seems to happen all the
time, though, right?
It does, but they want to avoid it because it's humiliating, right? Like they don't like being reversed. It says they got the law wrong and they didn't do their job properly, and it's a public opinion. Like imagine getting a performance review and having it be in like.
And then imagine being the Supreme Court and you're just chilling because no one's going to challenge you.
No one can do that. That's why all the judges want to be Supreme Court justices. But so they don't. So as a result, if they don't want to be reversed, they try and put all their decisions in writing and make them pretty rigorous so that they survive appeal. Literally, the guy just looked at the Kraken plaintiffs and their lawyers and was like, "You guys lose for like 4 reasons. 1, 2, 3, 4. You never could get into court. Even if you could, your claims are meritless. Go away." Like it was. I haven't seen that in a serious piece of litigation in a long time.
I mean, wasn't the filing missing spacings between words?
Oh, there are typos all over the place.
But not typos. Like there were whole paragraphs that had no spaces.
Oh, it was a mess. It was not proofread. And I mean,
what is this?
I mean, it's like they're. I don't know what's going on. I don't understand it because when I was practicing law, if I did that, I would have gotten fired.
So the reason I ask is I hear a lot it's 4D chess. They're trying to lose on purpose to get to the Supreme Court.
There's nothing good about losing.
Right.
You're going to go to the Supreme Court even if you win, because the other, like again, like say Sidney Powell wins her lawsuit at the district court level. You think the other side's going to be like, well, we're done here. I guess we're just leaving, you know.
Yeah, they'd appeal and say no.
They'd appeal.
It would make it's going there no matter what.
Right, and you'd like to have like an opinion that says you were right from the lower court, at least to like give you some presumption. Like there's a strategy to losing.
When they lost, when Trump's campaign lost, and I think the Third Circuit over.
Yeah.
I was basically saying, a bunch of people were like, "That's exactly what we wanted. Thanks for ruling so quickly, so we can get to SCOTUS." And I'm like, there is a good point to be made in that if they're going to win and they're still going to SCOTUS anyway, then they want to get there as fast as possible, right? So that makes sense, sort of. But still, you'd rather win than lose, even if that was the case.
Right, and you don't want to lose the way they lost in the Third Circuit, which was, again, in all these procedural problems, like things like even if you won your point, you wouldn't have enough to change the result of the election based on the claims you're making, so you have to get out of court, or, you know.
Well, that was they wanted to amend the complaint a second time or whatever.
Oh, yeah, gosh, the way they went about that was so silly. They wanted to amend the complaint a second time. They weren't actually appealing the underlying substantive ruling. They were appealing the decision by the district court not to let them fix their complaint. And that's granted liberally because you basically everybody should have access to justice, so they shouldn't be kicked out of court in a technicality. But the Trump campaign had been there saying, we have to get this done by November 23rd. We need to do it really fast because, you know, the election, the certification ball, we have to get it done fast. And then the district court dismisses their case, and they're like, oh, well, can we fix the complaint and take another 6 weeks? And the district court's like, no.
Wow.
You said,
late.
Yeah. And
so my question then is, and we'll go back to Texas and get to the heart of that lawsuit. Rudy Giuliani, is he a old crackpot, well past his prime, who's falling apart, or a mad, freaky genius playing 4D chess who's going to pull out a tremendous victory for Trump? It's only one or the other. There's no middle ground.
Well, I mean, I don't want to be mean to Rudy Giuliani, but he's doing like what many other people are doing. It's PR in the place of law. Like, I was really disappointed to see Giuliani being selected to argue the appeal. Giuliani's not an appellate lawyer. He hasn't practiced appellate law in years. He hasn't argued any appeals, as far as I know. I mean, it's possible I'm wrong about this, and he argued the appeal recently, but that's like a practice. Like, and they were doing things like one of the things that in the Third Circuit case, people didn't miss this too. They appealed a temporary restraining order. That's actually wrong. You can't do that. You have to apply to the appellate court for an injunction pending appeal.
But how do you know this? They don't, and you're not even this kind of.
I didn't know this beforehand, but I read about it afterwards. Like,
shouldn't they have read it before?
Yeah, exactly. This is why you would hire experienced appellate lawyers, because they don't have to wait for the judge's opinion to find out what they should have done.
But you're a big Trump supporter.
Yeah.
I mean, you were mentioning this before the show that we had a conversation a couple of years ago where I was like, it sounds like we agree on all of these, like, you know, culture war kind of issues and stuff. And then I don't know if you asked me or I asked you or something, like you asked me then why wasn't I supporting Trump or something.
Yeah.
And then like I had some answers back in the day. I mean, back then it was like those are the Bolton stuff and the foreign policy failures and stuff. And that's kind of what. But the riots really changed things too. So now I'm like, you know what, man, everything else is kind of out the window. But so what you're saying is the best chance that Trump has right now to legitimately win, as per some kind of constitutional processes, martial law.
I think there's some possibility of the Texas law getting taken, the lawsuit getting taken, and its one virtue, if you will, is that it only has to get past this one big procedural hurdle, and then they can hear the case.
And what's that?
That's the Supreme Court deciding to grant permission for them to file the complaint.
So they haven't even filed the complaint yet.
Yeah, they've asked for permission to file it. And people are getting this wrong. They like see it on the docket. They're like, oh, SCOTUS has agreed to hear it. No, SCOTUS has, when they do that, they're saying, oh, you met the proper steps to ask for permission to file this complaint. That's all we're saying. Your filing was procedurally correct so far.
And then they decide if they want to hear it or not.
Yeah, they decide if they want to hear it or not. Odds are my answer is they probably won't. But if they get past that, if the SCOTUS decides on this one little decision, they're going to overlook how they've been doing things in the past.
And is it majority rule?
Yeah, it's a 5-4 decision.
Okay.
5-4? Because you don't count Roberts?
No, Roberts is a lip.
Yes, I know.
He's a total lip. But even so, I think, if I'm betting man, I'm not betting on the success of that litigation because in general, I mean, it's the problem we talked about earlier, that the interests underlying that they're trying to be vindicated there, right? Election irregularities, there's processes in the individual states to deal with it. And the Supreme Court generally hates having these original jurisdiction cases and only will take them if there's no other place it can be vindicated.
I don't know. Election betting odds has Trump up 0.7% today. Ooh. Considering the news, you'd think he'd be going down, but they still have him around 10% to win and be the next president.
That's free money. That's free money. That's what that is.
I don't know. I still wouldn't make that.
I'm going to disclose something. Maybe I shouldn't. After all this nonsense with the one stuff, I looked on PredictIt, and PredictIt was giving me they said Trump was at 13% to win, and you can make a bet on based on that.
So PredictIt has Trump at 14.
Oh wow, that's way too high.
Yeah, but you know what it is though. It's because you can buy them and then sell them when they go up. So when it's at 10 cents, people are like, I'll buy it because some news will come out, it'll go up to 12, and then I'll sell out.
Yeah.
And then make 2 cents.
Right.
I keep telling everybody, man, there's 2 big plays right here. If you really think Trump's got 4D chess, and the Kraken was only was actually hiding and wasn't slain at all, you really think Trump's going to win? You bet. You got to go and you got to place those bets, right?
Yeah, that's free.
I am not advocating
the other way, right? Like
if
you believe that 100% Trump's going to be in office in 2 months, that's absurd free money. You can make huge amounts of money.
You'll be rich. I saw one post on social media where someone claimed to have put like $20K into betting on Trump to win, and now they're panicking because it was like their life savings. But at the same time, I'll tell you this right here: you think that's true? It's free money?
Yeah, I mean.
Then why don't you bet on Biden? Right now, you can do it. You did.
I already did.
You bet on Biden.
Yeah, I got like $4,000 riding on Biden.
Wow.
Oh my goodness.
I'm sure there's a ton of people watching right now who are like, "Ooh, I hope he loses that money."
Well, there's sort of an ethical thing. Like, I think if you make predictions like this, you should bet on them.
That's a good point.
Betting is a tax on BS.
Yeah.
Right. Like.
That's a good point. Yeah.
Should
make a video series when Luke comes out and he says something, I'll be like, okay, put the money down. You know what I mean?
Right. Like, I mean, it's a real test. Like, all the people who are saying that Trump's 100% going to be in office, why aren't they? I mean, there's huge amounts of money to be made on this bet.
I mean, you're going to make, what is that, 86 cents on the dollar?
No, I'm not going to make that much because I'm betting on Biden. So
No, I'm saying someone would have bet.
Yeah.
You put down 14 cents for Trump, you win $1.
Yeah.
So put down $14 and win 100.
And I mean, the point being, not that I don't want Trump to win, I still do because I think it would be good for the country, but it's like, I've made public predictions that Trump will not win, and I feel like there's sort of an ethical obligation to be willing to put money on the public predictions I make.
Well, I'll tell you this: in 2018, I was like, I think the Republicans are gonna keep control, and they're gonna keep the House, maybe even gain in the House because all the culture war stuff was getting crazy. And turns out I was wrong.
Mm-hmm.
Actually, I was right. I was right for the first 2 days, and then about a week later, with all the mail-in ballots they started finding all over the place, then the Democrats ended up winning. So it's interesting how that happened, right?
Yeah.
So I was wrong. Then I said I thought Trump was going to win this one. I did say I'm very tepid most of the time, but I was saying for months leading to the election, I think Trump is going to win. That's my gut feeling, but Biden could win. Don't underestimate your opponent. So when it turns out that now the election is going Biden's way, and I'm saying Biden's got this, I'm probably wrong again. And now we're all going no. I've been saying over and over again ever since the 7th. It's 99.99%, for Biden. The reason I reserve that, actually earlier on I said it was 97%,
Yeah.
This was before Trump actually filed the lawsuits, and I was like, so he has all of these ways to challenge these things. And then as he's, his campaign and other Republicans and pro-Trump individuals have been losing, I'm like, he of course still can.
Right.
But is it at a point where it's like winning the lottery 3 times in a row? Or
I
just
mean,
like,
it's just really unlikely. He has to win all these election contests. The time, we're running into the time constraints where the Electoral College is going to vote. I mean, even at the beginning, I said that the odds have been prevailing after the election results came in, like 5% at max.
Well, on January 6th, the members of Congress can contest, can dispute.
Right. I mean,
and it happens apparently relatively often. Never works. It never goes anywhere.
Yeah. I mean, that's like what I would expect to happen here.
But isn't it true that what is it, Article 2, Section 1, or is it Section 2, Article 1 of the Constitution?
That sounds. If it's about Congress, it would be Article 1.
Constitution.
Oh no, you're right. It's about the presidential election, so it's Article 2.
That it doesn't matter what the states say. The state legislatures always decide.
Yeah, I mean, I think there's that absolute authority is placed in the state legislatures, but I don't think they're going to do anything to contradict the Electoral College. I mean, the precedent there is crazy. Like, if you think about it, the idea that the state elections don't matter and that
they don't.
I mean, in like.
This is the craziest thing, because I've been reading more and more about early U.S. history, and the Founding Fathers didn't want direct democracy. Like, we all know that, and we've actually been sort of eroded in that direction for some time.
Yeah.
Like the 17th Amendment, which I'm sure you're familiar with.
The Senate, meaning making the Senate elections direct elections.
Exactly. It used to be appointments by the state legislatures.
Right.
And so senators were... I think that system made more sense in a lot of ways. You know why?
Why?
We don't care about local elections anymore, and now our own communities fall apart and become detached and dejected.
Yeah, it's like our whole politics has been nationalized. Like, you can't run a local paper doing local politics section. That's a whole,
No one cares.
No one.
Yeah. And what's really irksome to me is when I see someone running for Congress talking about how if they get elected, they're going to do all the good things for our district. I'm like, you represent the district to the federal government. You don't clean up your district. You go to Congress and vote on national level policy.
Yeah, and here's a real interesting thing that the whole idea of representing your district, that basically went out the window with the ban of earmarks. That was the way they represented their district. They got a little money for like little pet projects. Now they don't even do that.
But the issue is, if you want your town cleaned up, you got to vote local.
Yeah.
And so before the 17th Amendment, for those that aren't familiar, 17th Amendment says senators will be chosen by popular vote. Before that, the state legislatures would essentially vote. The problem was there was bribery or some kind of, just crony BS.
Yeah, no, that came out of like Teddy Roosevelt and all the good government stuff that they were doing in the early 1900s.
But think about it. If that's how the system still worked, then you'd be like, you gotta vote for, who's the PA state senator guy who's Mastriano, is that his name?
Yeah.
Yeah, you'd be like, you gotta make sure he gets reelected because he's gonna make sure to get a good senator for us. Now it's like, I don't even know who that guy is, and I live in Pennsylvania, right? Not me personally, I'm just saying figuratively. Like, you've got people who live in PA who can't even name who's in their General Assembly. Can you name?
I just moved to Maryland, but I don't know. I don't even know who my...
I lived in New York for 5 years. I can't name a single person.
Yeah,
I can name Ocasio-Cortez. I didn't live in her district.
Yeah.
And she's federal level. I can't speak. I don't know who the councilmen are. I don't know who I don't know any of that stuff.
Yeah.
It has been... Everything's being nationalized, and it's extremely dangerous. It's not just about politics, it's about media.
Yes.
Let's say this was talked about like a decade ago, as local media was dying off because the internet was replacing everything. This maybe this plays into the culture war in a lot of ways. It used to be that your tribe was partially local. Mm-hmm. What you cared about locally might be your high school football team versus the neighboring town or whatever. But with social media, the tribes became singular, national, top level, and like very specific.
Right.
If they used to write about with this phenomenon, you could have a local politician be extremely corrupt, and there's no one to write about it because no one cares. Do I care about I don't know, the mayor of Gainesville committing some crime or whatever? No, I care about DeSantis. I don't care about the smaller town mayor or whatever, or the city councilman. It's not going to make the news. No one's really going to care. Unless it's really crazy, like, he builds a flying machine and then starts dropping mortars on people or something.
I don't know, maybe, I have to think about it, though, because part of this is youth and, living wherever you want. I wonder if, we would change our minds if we were, well, I guess you are a homeowner, but,
yep.
If I was, personally a homeowner in a place and knew I was going to stay there for 20 years, I might start caring a little more about local elections.
Yeah.
But no, your general point, though, is correct about how, our politics has been nationalized, our media has been nationalized, and the concerns people have are ultimate. And also, I have a random thing, people would say to me, there's, I think you might have said this, there's no way Joe Biden got 80 million some votes.
Mm-hmm. I think there's a way, for sure.
Right. And
people were let's play the media game. Normies were radicalized by a psychotic Trump derangement media apparatus that sought to make money off of outrage about Trump. And it created a whirlpool that sucked in regular people who snapped and said, I just can't take it anymore. Biden, boom.
Yeah, no, I think that was exactly my thesis, right? Like, sports went away. Like, what were people even focused on over the last year?
But I think Trump got Ocean's 11. That's the way I put it. Like, the real heist happened months ago when they were going around knocking on doors and saying vote, when they're doing ballot harvesting, when they were doing those illegal democracy in the park things in Wisconsin. There's the viral videos of the Native American women saying, like, we're going to give you money if you vote. Like, make sure you just tell us you vote. One tribe actually said, send us a picture of you voting, we'll send you $20. Like, super illegal stuff.
Oh yeah, I no doubt there were tons of shenanigans too. Like I remember, I was in Philly on election day.
You were posting those videos.
Yeah, the video of the poll watcher.
I referenced that when we had Destiny here. He's a leftist, and he said, if these claims of like irregularity and fraud and stuff are the observers being blocked were true, then where were all the videos on election night? And I was like, Will Chamberlain was there, and he posted like a video in the morning of like an observer being kicked out.
Yeah,
it happened.
Yeah, that's weird. Like there were so many people. Just a random side note. So many people denied that. Like I saw fact checks that were like.
Yeah,
there was BuzzFeed tried to fact check. I literally corrected her, and she withdrew it. To her credit,
yeah,
like
that's so
she's
weird.
Like, he wasn't, and then
they tried claiming that he was at the wrong precinct or whatever.
Right. It's like,
and then he posted the photo where it's like good in any precinct. Or
right.
Something.
Exactly.
So
like
weird.
They were so tuned for like, oh, there's misinformation. People are going to spread misinformation. I'm like, you guys know there's actual shenanigans going on in Philly, and I don't know that there was some like massive plot to like thwart poll watching. It's more like that, What I would attribute this particular thing to was just sort of an arrogance among the poll workers in that area that like they were kings of the castle. They dictated what happened. They didn't need to pay attention.
But they did you see the video where the guy yells, "All Republican poll watchers leave now" or whatever?
I didn't see that one, but
yeah. There's stuff like that. Or they're putting up boards to block the windows. Do you see what Scott Adams said about this?
What?
He said, if you are having a discussion about the potential irregularities or fraud after they barred observers and blocked windows, you're a victim of misinformation and essentially misdirection.
Yeah.
Because as soon as they said no witnesses, you can't do anything after that.
Right. Like,
so when they say, where's the evidence of fraud? I don't know. They kicked out the observers and boarded the windows up.
Right. And I'm actually for as a general rule, like the idea that if you wrongfully kick out poll watchers, then the votes go away. Right.
Yeah.
We assume you've committed fraud. The presumption is you committed fraud, and you need to affirmatively prove you didn't. Right.
Yes.
Like, I mean, that's that's how it kind of works in the court system generally. Like, if you fail to produce something in litigation, judges will eventually issue an adverse inference instruction saying, jury, you need to assume that this was terrible evidence for them that proved that they did something horrible.
Interesting.
And that's the way I should look at. I think we should look at. But we need to change the law to do this, right? But I think we should change the law about poll watchers, and get people to a point where when they are instructed about working a poll and letting a poll watcher in, they're like, we better not restrict this poll watcher because the consequences of doing so are terrible.
Thanks for checking out this clip from the Timcast IRL podcast. We do the show live Monday through Friday at 8 p.m., so come back to check us out when we go live. Don't forget to subscribe, hit the like button, hit the notification bell, and we are also available on all podcast platforms for free if you want to listen to us there. Thanks for hanging out, and we will see you all next time.
Speaking of balls, let's get to the Chinese Communist Party.
Wait, I mean, truly though.
Eric Swalwell. And by the way, have you noticed? Let's go to CNN. They have not talked about this at all.
No.
They're talking about vaccines and how only 55% of people will take one, and they want you to be required and mandated. And let's not even want to get into the vaccine stuff right now because, but they're not.
It's just Turtleneck and Turtle Club.
It's Turtleneck and Turtle. Now, is that Poppy Harlow?
Yes, that's Poppy.
See? It's very hard for me to tell them apart.
Yeah.
Understand.
It's really not your fault. What do you mean them?
Blondes.
All of those.
Yep. Like, I mean blondes and sixes. You would think this is news, considering how they ran on Russia, right? Russia for a very long time about our constitutional republic being compromised.
Correct.
Nothing on the fact that verifiably China. This is almost a rehash of what happened with Anthony Weiner. They tried to blame it on that guy, Andrew Breitbart, when he actually had the video. He had the pictures, and he told the press that he had the pictures. And they said, okay, how do we start a disinformation campaign to discredit Andrew Breitbart? And people only found out about Anthony Weiner because Andrew Breitbart took over his podium at a press conference that was planned. I remember this clear as day. You could hear people running down the hallways of the lobby yelling, Breitbart's in the building! And you just saw a wave of terror. Go and Google that Anthony Weiner press conference, Andrew Breitbart. That is the watershed moment where the media realized, we don't control everything anymore. I'm not talking about Breitbart, the trademark. That man who was the first human being to RSVP at my wedding, and I miss him. He is gone. But this is what's happening right now. The term gaslighting is thrown around a whole lot. And I feel a lot of conservatives are feeling that where you're not crazy. It's mental warfare. They want to make you feel alone right now. No, we know verifiably that there have been Chinese spies, communist spies, who have compromised American elected officials. This doesn't mean that governments are all working together just so that Eric Swalwell can get a handy in a bathroom. But he did get more than a handy in a bathroom, and the guy did run for president. The fact that it was painfully unsuccessful doesn't matter. It could happen to anyone.
At least he got something out of it.
So Axios published a bombshell. A bombshell if it was anyone other than Swalwell. On how this Chinese spy named Fang Fang.
I know. That's not racist.
That was me. That was my fault.
Was able to infiltrate California political circles. There were at least 2 of Fang's sexual interactions were caught on FBI surveillance.
What?
George Michael did a better job. Dude. Like, here's the thing, Eric Swalwell, I don't expect you to honor our constitutional constraints and the founding principles of our republic. Like, just use a porta potty.
With some walls. And if you're a spy for another country and you get caught by FBI surveillance, you're not a very good spy.
You're not a very good spy if you target Eric Swalwell thinking he's the key to power.
Talk about compromising and how easy it is. You know the Chinese spy, this is my favorite quote from it, okay? Where we're going. The quote from the Axios article, one of the, quote, most significant targets of Fang's efforts was Representative Eric Swalwell. Caught on 2 surveillance. Like, how did that work? How stupid is... Oh, man, I have a fantasy. You ever have a fantasy of having a sex in a wide open field with telephone pole and blinking red lights? I don't know. I thought, can you be selfless? You're supposed to put my needs first.
I'm going to ride this dope to the top.
Can you imagine being the other 2 guys that are not as important as Swalwell in this article? That's the most significant target. You're like, son of a...
second and third to Swalwell.
Get a sex spy.
There's the epidemic of communist Chinese spy whores, and the media is not talking about it. This actually happened. And by the way, just in case YouTube wants to remove this, the Chinese communist... I want to be clear when I say this. ChICom is the Chinese Communist Party. Okay? Unlike LeBron James and Disney, we actually pointed out the protests in Hong Kong and people who were singing the national anthem because we're their only hope. When you talk about American-Chinese relationships, Democratic Party, I'm looking in your direction, and big tech, but I repeat myself, what you really are doing is removing hope from the actual citizens of China who hope for a better life someday. We're the shining city on a hill, and you're putting it out like a candle snuffer from the mom and E.T., okay? That's what you're doing for these Chinese people. Let's separate the Chinese government from the people. Love the people, beautiful women, I will say it.
Yeah, why not?
Guys, sorry, you just gotta, the math.
Sure.
Right. The Chinese have been doing this, the Chinese Communist Party, and now from now on I will say ChIComs are Chinese. Hopefully we've established this.
Because it's short. Like
they've been doing this for, I'm just gonna say Cha. They've been doing this for a long time. How do I know? They've said it. Here you go.
前边特朗普政府跟我们打贸易战，那么我们为什么搞不定特朗普政府？啊？为什么以前1992年到2016年之间，
We're not playing a record backwards.
大家发现没有？所有的危机，不管是银河号事件，还是炸大使馆，还是撞了飞机，所有事情。 全部是床头吵架床尾和，2个月之内搞定。
Look at this. They're talking about compromising the United States government and Donald Trump acting as a bloc.
咱们上边有人。
It's because we have people at the top. At the top of America's core inner circle of power and influence. we have old friends. John Lennon is dead. That's what happened.
Oh, no. So sad.
The devil. So that's the guy saying, hey, we've always managed to have some people in the powerful inner circles at the top in the United States, and it hasn't been the case with this administration. This is something that people have known behind the scenes for a while, but might be banned if they talk about. But now that Axios, who I believe is considered a reputable source, though that number is being whittled down by the day if they report news, hopefully now some people will pay attention to it. And if you don't believe, I don't know how to, I'm trying to avoid pronouncing his name. Dongsheng?
I don't, who knows?
Oh, gosh. If you don't believe that gentleman, whose name I can't pronounce, just listen to California Senator Dianne Feinstein in 2013.
I'm especially pleased that California's first trade office has its home in Shanghai. And I have a very special connection with Shanghai. As mayor of San Francisco a long time ago, I had the honor of establishing a sister city relationship with Shanghai. It was the first sister city relationship
Before they drowned the sister
between
city
the
in a
United
bathtub.
States and a Chinese city. And to this very day, I remember Mayor Wang Daohan very well, and Jiang Zemin and Mayor Zhu Rongji, two of which, both John and
pull out that
Zhu,
board game.
became president and premier, respectively, of the country. The relationship, though, yielded tremendous economic and cultural benefits, and that's
the American
been true
worker?
over the past 30 years.
Oh, yeah.
I know this
Well, I
new
think
office
allies, I
will
think
build on the
Chinese.
powerful and unique partnership between California and China.
Just hold on a moment. We have to go to your good friend running someone over with a tank for singing the American national anthem. Cultural benefits. And by the way, I want to be clear too, this doesn't mean that everything made in China or made in Taiwan is bad, because if you're talking about something that's made by Chinese communists or American Union communists, the Chinese have better prices. So, made in America, if we're talking about right to work, very different than union gunpoint. By the way, let's be really clear as we talk about Fang fundraise for Swalwell's campaign, re-election specifically, and helped place, according to at least one intern in Swalwell's office.
Which is not a euphemism.
No, not a euphemism.
No.
And this isn't either. She was, quote, everywhere.
Again, not
These are actual quotes.
euphemism. Come on, grow up.
I know we might get fact-checked for it not being news, but you have a problem with Axios, Dianne Feinstein, and Zhang?
I mean, she was everywhere.
She was everywhere. By the way, hit the notification bell if you're subscribed. Hit the notification bell if you're subscribed, because subscriptions don't mean a whole lot right now. Weekday mornings, 10 a.m. Eastern. And like I said, we will be doing an Ask Me Anything on the 3 to 6 hour live stream driving through Nevada to bogus addresses next Thursday. So leave your comment below. That's the best thing you can do right now, is just leave a comment, because YouTube can't ban us all. Leave a comment, whatever it is that you feel like asking me. Here's another thing. This is just so hard.
Such a funny story.
It's so hard to cover a topic like this. First off, I don't care. It's in my head because right before we went live, this is when Google and YouTube issued that statement that they're going to fact check it. I don't, you know what? I think this relates to an election when you had a presidential candidate who was compromised by a Chinese sex spy. I think that creates a liability in the representatives of our constitutional republic.
Right. Yeah. And just because she chose poorly as to who to go for.
They don't know. If you told me I had to go sleep my way to the top of the Chinese Communist Party, I wouldn't know where to start.
Yeah. Well, maybe we all look alike to them.
Well, I don't know what your starting point is.
Politicians.
Because I appreciate all the wondrous splendor that is the diverse palette of China. I can recognize all of them. By the way, and in the spirit of being fair here, okay, I don't like doggy piling on anyone, okay? I don't like being a member of the bully gang, the bully pulpit. And Eric Swalwell has his hands full. He has for a long time. His fingers full.
Yeah.
Right. Pincers. Like tuning in old radio. But people have been saying, how are you going to incorporate the Eric Swalwell farting thing? Look, it's hacky, and I don't want to be unfair to the guy. Yeah. It's a serious issue. Yeah. It's no laughing matter. You guys all of you out there could use an education. Just grow up.
Discomfort. Irritation. embarrassment. Mild to severe short-term incontinence due to pegging from communist spies is no laughing matter, but there is relief. President Donald Trump. The Chinese Communist Party has no greater fear than that this jolly orange giant has 4 more years in office, and your state can join in on the lawsuit from Texas to kick out the Chi-Coms. Together, we can put an end to Chinese spy pegging-induced short to medium-term incontinence. There is a solution. Paid for by the Pact to End Chinese Spy-Induced Mild to Severe Short-Term Incontinence.
Mild to severe.
It's an important cause.
It's an important
I know
cause.
I'm donating next. Yeah.
It's almost like it's preventable.
Yeah.
This isn't a conspiracy. I want to be really clear about all this. This is from Axios. We just listened to Chinese representatives. We just listened to Dianne Feinstein. Eric Swalwell has yet to comment, and we can also go back through the tape, because the internet is forever, where he downplayed the idea of China, again, the Communist Party of China, who abuses its own citizens, commits gross atrocities against human rights. Eric Swalwell downplaying that Chinese party, those Chi-Coms, as a threat. I'm very concerned, though, that today the president's administration put out a statement that you have China and Russia and Iran, and they're all interfering, and gave this false equivalence to them. And Nicole, this would be like if a meteorologist saw that there was going to be snowflakes in the Rockies, a lightning storm in the Midwest, and a Category 5 hurricane to hit the East Coast, and just put out an alert that there's going to be a weather event this weekend. That is the equivalent of what they have done, I think, to politically protect the president. It's so much worse when you watch that back and understand in context that he seemed rushed for an appointment with a lady named Fang and a ball gag. At that time, he was being compromised on video.
Yeah. And I think you got the Ted
What
Cruz
point do we get to
beard.
treason? What point do we get to treason? Seriously, what point do we get to treason?
Yeah.
Or I guess maybe if he didn't know she's a spy. Okay, so that's not treason.
Yeah.
He didn't know she was a spy.
I guess that would be the defense.
Watch Good Morning Mug Club live every Monday through Thursday at 10:15 Eastern.
A woke Santa brings a boy to tears over a Nerf gun. Texas files suit with the Supreme Court over illegal voting in the battleground states. Plus, the Chicago Teachers Union says the push to reopen schools is racist. All that and more. I'm Bobby Everly. This is a 13-minute news hour.
God bless the United States of America.
All right, friends, welcome to the show. Happy Wednesday. I hope you're having a great week. If you're new to the show, thank you so much for tuning in. We're going to start with Christmas, my favorite time of the year. Whether it's celebrating the birth of Jesus, exchanging gifts with friends and family, or maybe watching Elf or Die Hard. That's me, but that's not the left. They see Christmas as a threat, and they want to push to cancel it. And we see two different fronts during this Christmas season. We see first the push to cancel Christmas, just like Thanksgiving, because of control, because of power. Don't go out. Don't do anything. Don't see anyone. Rat out on your friends and neighbors if you see too many cars in front of their house. That's what they're pushing. Here's Dr. Fauci on CNN.
So I hope that people realize that and understand that as difficult as this is, nobody wants to modify, if not essentially shut down their holiday season. But we are in a very critical time in this country right now. We've got to not walk away from the facts and the data.
Yep, cancel Christmas, shut down everything, don't go anywhere. And why? Because of the science and data, they say. Except the science and data do not support what they're pushing. This is all about power. This is all about control. Then you have those left-wing radicals that want to get rid of Christmas because they're just plain too woke to stand it. They can't stand it. They want to push their leftist ideas on everyone, including kids. Here's a story of a boy. He went to the mall. He asked for a present. He was brought to tears because the Santa was just too woke. And here's how it started.
What do you want for Christmas? You don't know. What?
All right, so it's a little hard to understand there, but Santa asked, "What do you want for Christmas?" And the boy replied, "Nerf gun." Here's what happens next.
No guns. Nerf gun. No, not even a Nerf gun. No, if your dad wants to get it for you, that's fine, but I can't bring it to you.
So gun, no. Nerf gun, no way. No guns at all. The poor kid is just stunned. So the Santa goes on and lists other options that he could pick. And here's how it ends.
What do you think? What do you think? It's okay, your dad.
Wow, welcome to Christmas 2020. No gatherings for your family, no Nerf guns, and while you're at it, don't even mention guns. What is going on? We can't even mention them. Remember the iPhone, the emojis? It used to look like this, and then Apple got woke and changed it to this. What is going on? It's just a gun, but now we can't mention it, and God forbid that we have a kid ask for a Nerf gun. Can't have that. Can't have it at all. And here's more of the story. My poor baby, Sabella DiCarlo, later wrote on Facebook, "This was the first year Michael was excited to go see Santa. It was supposed to be magical, but instead I had to watch my sweet little boy fight back tears because Santa told him no because of his own personal beliefs." Harlem Irving Plaza said it and their third-party Santa company were distraught and deeply apologetic over the Santa's behavior. Santa is heartbroken and crushed that he has made this child so sad and upset and turned in his resignation, the company wrote on Facebook. The Santa company will continue to remind all Santas how important it is to not impose personal opinions during visits with the children. So, just so you know, Harlem Irving Plaza, that mall, they reached out to the real Santa who made a trip down from the North Pole, and now that kid has a Nerf gun.
So there was a mistake made yesterday, huh?
Yeah.
I heard about this up at the North Pole.
Yeah, me.
And I rushed down hill.
This is crazy, this thing.
You say?
Thanks.
So nice ending there, but it's not really the ending because this goes on all the time. We have to push back. The left will keep trying to push their ideas, push their radical policies, and it's all designed to get rid of the family, get rid of tradition, get rid of anything that brings people together, because the only thing they want to bring people together is government. Government and power, that's the motives, the operations of the left. So next, let's talk about the legal battles that are still going on for election 2020. But first, if you're new to the show or haven't subscribed yet, please subscribe, and when you do, please hit that bell so you'll be notified. We're making our push for 150,000 subscribers, and we can do it with your help. All right, let's start with President Trump, because he was giving a briefing yesterday on the coronavirus vaccines and Operation Warp Speed, how they're pushing this out, how they met his deadlines by getting vaccines out by the end of the year. That's what he said. He was criticized for it. He was attacked, but that's actually exactly what's happening. So he opened up the briefing for questions. Of course, a reporter jumps in and says, well, why aren't members of the Biden transition team here? Because they'll be the next administration to actually implement this. President Trump said he believes that the next administration will be the Trump administration. And here's the president.
Because you can't steal hundreds of thousands of votes. You can't have fraud and deception and all of the things that they did and then slightly win a swing state. And you just have to look at the numbers, look at what's been on tape, look at all the corruption, and we'll see. You can't win an election like that. So hopefully the next administration will be the Trump administration.
So the president pointed out that he received 12 million more votes than last time. That is always an indicator of winning re-election. He pointed out all the craziness that has been documented, all the witnesses that have come forward, all the evidence, all the affidavits. He points that out. Reporters don't care. They don't want to do any investigating on their own. There's no questions to Joe Biden at all. And then he says, what I brought up just on the last show, that now it comes down to political courage.
All of the things we've done, and we were rewarded with a victory. Now let's see whether or not somebody has the courage whether it's a legislator or legislatures, or whether it's a justice of the Supreme Court or a number of justices of the Supreme Court. Let's see if they have the courage to do what everybody in this country knows is right.
That was awesome. And we have to fight back, folks. We have to fight back. The Democrats said there was going to be a blue wave. There wasn't. We stopped that. There was a red wave. Every toss-up race on the House side went for Republicans. Every toss-up race on the Senate side went for Republicans, except the two that we still need to decide. President Trump lifted Republicans up, Republicans, for payback, to show appreciation even, need to fight for this president. He's still fighting. They need to fight. We've seen the evidence. We've heard from the witnesses. Get out there and fight. Also, Texas. Don't mess with Texas, folks. Texas has stepped up and filed lawsuits straight with the Supreme Court going after the battleground states who have blatantly disregarded their own state's election laws. And here's the story. Texas Attorney General Ken Paxton filed suit on Tuesday against Georgia, Michigan, Pennsylvania, and Wisconsin, claiming the four states exploited the pandemic to justify ignoring election laws. In papers filed with the U.S. Supreme Court, Paxton claimed the states unlawfully enacted last-minute changes which skewed the results of the general election. The paper also alleged that the majority of the rushed decisions made by local officials were not approved by state legislatures, thereby circumventing the Constitution. The battleground states flooded their people with unlawful ballot applications and ballots while ignoring statutory requirements as to how they were received, evaluated, and counted, according to a statement posted on the Texas Attorney General's website. So this is awesome. This is an awesome move by Texas, and hopefully it will bring to light in front of the Supreme Court all the unconstitutional things that went on. And again, this is not a push about the machines, Dominion voting machines, fake ballots, ballots coming in the middle of the night, no observers, things like that. This is about violating election laws, changing dates, and accepting hundreds of thousands of ballots that are illegal because they did not meet the requirements laid forward in law by the state legislatures. And here's more. The states violated statutes enacted by their duly elected legislatures, thereby violating the Constitution. By ignoring both state and federal law, these states have not only tainted the integrity of their own citizens' votes, but of Texas and every other state that held lawful elections, said Attorney General Ken Paxton. The failure to abide by the rule of law casts a dark shadow of doubt over the outcome of the entire election. We now ask that the Supreme Court step in to correct this egregious error. So we'll see how this goes. There's other cases still working their way up, other cases that may be in front of the Supreme Court. We have to keep the fight. And like President Trump said, we need political courage. This can be avoided. All this can be avoided in the courts. We don't even have to go to the courts. We just need the legislators in these states to call special sessions and say, you know what, this was a mess. This was illegal. We have no confidence in this vote. We can't send electors. We just can't do it. We need to abstain and let it work itself out there. You don't even have to go to the courts. But again, in order to do that, you need political courage. So next, let's talk about the Chicago Teachers Union. But first, just in time for Christmas, I have to tell you about World Fair. Folks, if you have a picture of a house, maybe a stadium or building that is special to you from college or any architectural structure, World Fair can turn that into a handmade work of art. I have these drawings of every home I've ever lived in. It's a great conversation piece, and as I said, it'll make a great Christmas gift. Just go to the World Fair link in the description, use coupon code Bobby13 for 10% off. All right, let's talk about schools and the Chicago Teachers Union, because there is this push by the unions and Democrat leaders who, again, want control, want to destabilize our society. They're pushing to keep schools closed. And they cite the science and data. And again, the science and data not only don't support that, they support the opposite. Studies have shown that kids need to be in school, that they are not super spreaders. Schools are open across the world, yet these teachers union want to keep them closed, and they ignore the science. It's like, we support science and data. Well, guess what? Science and data says schools should be open. Oh, well, you're racist. That's what they say, and that's actually what the Chicago Teachers Union is saying, and here's the story. The Chicago Teachers Union faced backlash on Twitter for a now deleted tweet claiming that the push to reopen schools is rooted in sexism, racism, and misogyny. The CTU has posted a number of tweets emphasizing widening disparities in health outcomes from the coronavirus for people of color. One of their retweets called social distancing a privilege. Yep, you can't make this stuff up, folks. And here's the tweet that they took down. Here's the Chicago Teachers Union. So that was it. No explanation, no nothing. They stated that, then they took it down. But some of the replies were 100% right on point, and here's more. Some critics of the CTU cited a lawsuit in California brought by 7 families who claim that remote learning in the state left many already underserved students functionally unable to attend school, according to the Washington Post. Education advocates have expressed concerns that remote learning will widen the achievement gap that separates Black, Latino, and poor students from their peers. Since the implementation of remote learning and hybrid models across the country, school systems across the country have reported increased rates of failure and truancy. In Fairfax County, Virginia, the percentage of failing grades has nearly doubled, hitting underserved communities and students with disabilities most severely. So it's not about the science, not about the science at all. Look at that tweet. They're saying the push to reopen is racist because that's their go-to line. They don't have the science to back them up, so they're going to call people racist. It's outrageous. So next, let's talk about Los Angeles. This past weekend, it was their annual gun buyback program. And again, this is where they encourage people, law-abiding citizens, to just turn in their guns. Thugs and gangs and criminals, drug dealers, they're not going to participate. They're not going to line up. Nope, this is for everyday citizens to turn in their guns and make them unable to defend themselves and ultimately less safe. And here's the report.
It's the 8th year of the gun buyback program held by Mayor Garcetti's office and run by the LAPD. Folks anonymously hand over their firearms and are handed gift cards in return.
So the report goes on to then talk about the soaring statistics, the soaring stats on gun violence that's plaguing LA. And here you go.
Here in Los Angeles, gun violence statistics are soaring. Homicides are up 29% from last year with 311 lives lost. And more than 1,100 people have been shot.
Well, if LA is anything like Chicago or Detroit or Atlanta, we know who is shooting whom. It's funny that the media love to bring in race when it suits their narrative, like if a white cop shoots a black suspect. But when it comes to overall gun violence stats, like the shootings and killings that occur every weekend in Chicago and LA and Atlanta, Detroit, and on, race is never mentioned. They never mention that at all. It's quite interesting. Then, this is how the story ends.
Today, the city and police department showed a united front on the one issue that isn't political or controversial: stopping gun violence and saving lives.
Not controversial. Are you kidding me? This is so controversial. They're trying to get guns out of law-abiding citizens' hands, making them less safe. Good luck on your home invasion as you're waiting for the cops when these bad guys are about to shoot you and you had guns, but you turned them in under encouragement from Garcetti and all of these other left-wing leaders. It's just outrageous. Folks, that's our show for today. I hope you enjoyed it. Please subscribe, and when you do, please hit that bell so you'll be notified, and we'll see you next time. I'm Bobby Eberle. This is a 13-minute news hour. Okay, friends, thanks so much for watching. And before you go, please hit that subscribe button, hit that bell so you'll be notified. And here's a special video just for you so you can watch even more of the 13-minute news hour. And don't forget to check out GOPUSA.com for the best in conservative news and commentary. We'll see you next time.
Wait to see the clip we're going to play in this report. Unhinged Oregon teacher has a complete meltdown at a pro-freedom rally at the protesters. Wait to see this. A quick note, though, before we show it to you. If this is your first time watching, I want to welcome you and invite you to join the over 1.95 million people who call Next News their home for conservative news and opinion by tapping the red subscription button down below. Just make sure you hit that notification bell when you do. Buckle up, folks. Cassandra Fairbanks from the Gateway Pundit reports that a woman claiming to be a teacher stopped her car and had a complete meltdown at anti-lockdown protests. It happened in Bend, Oregon over the weekend. The belligerent woman shouted, telling people to kill themselves as she berated the protesters from her vehicle, screaming, "I'm a teacher," as if that has some kind of bearing or giving her some level of authority over these people. She screamed it aggressively, repeatedly, shouting at the peaceful demonstrators. Watch this. Oh man, of course she's driving a Subaru, right? I was expecting to see a coexist sticker on the back of that Subaru, but no. Apparently she doesn't believe in that line of thinking. Residents of Bend have been protesting the lockdown restrictions for weeks out of concern that the lockdown will cripple businesses and workers who are already struggling. Of course, that point had clearly missed this teacher. Comment below. We'll see you at the next report for the Next News Network. I'm Gary Franchi. Thank you for watching that report. Did you know that a good tactical flashlight is a powerful tool, powerful enough to have enough brightness to blind an attacker, durable enough to handle getting dropped down, thrown, or smashed, or reliable enough to never stop working even in the harshest environments? And in a pinch, yeah, you could probably trigger a seizure with Hillary Clinton with this version. Now, the Fighter Flare flashlight comes with all of this and more. I want you to get the Fighter Flare flashlight at fighterflare.com. Click the link in the description. You'll get 30% off in celebration of Black Friday with the promo code NNN30. Get yours today. I highly recommend it. Has a USB charger on it. It's solar. It has so many functions. It can break windows. It can cut seat belts. It'll save you in a pinch. Believe me. I mean, with all these features. Wait till you see this one here. Look at this. Look at this. Wait, there it is. It's got that. And oh, it's got all these features. Where's that one? There it is. That's the one I was looking for. How cool is that? So hit the link in the description below. I highly recommend it. We'll see you at the next report. For the Next News Network, I'm Gary Franchi.
You possess the power to impact the global narrative. Please share this report, and to get more videos like this, become the Next News subscriber by clicking the link below. Thank you for watching the Next News Network.
YouTube has just announced that if you claim widespread fraud or error changed the outcome of the 2020 election, your content will be removed. Naturally, on Twitter, this is blowing up. People are calling it draconian, despotic. I agree with these things. But let me just first start by saying, in no uncertain terms, I do not believe widespread voter fraud or irregularity changed the outcome of the election.
Oh, give me a break.
Is it possible? Sure. Has it been proven? No. Does evidence of fraud exist? Yes. Does evidence of widespread fraud exist? Yes. To what degree is widespread? That's an opinion and it's up for you to decide. Does error and impropriety exist? Yes. Is it enough to have changed the outcome of the election? That I do not believe so at this point because no one's presented me enough evidence to make that claim. I also want to make sure people realize this is insane and draconian what YouTube is doing. People are entitled to their opinions based on how they assess information. But I also want you to realize, just hold on a minute and hear me out. I believe what YouTube is doing is going to help Donald Trump. I really do mean it. I don't think it's going to help him as much as he might want. I think YouTube is wrong. I think their legal assessment is wrong. I think they're despotic and authoritarian. But I think Trump needs legitimacy to overturn the election. Now, I know I can already get a Trump supporter saying, we're not overturning anything. That's what they've claimed, because they're saying that, they actually won. Well, Donald Trump actually himself tweeted, overturn. Okay, sure, I don't know what that means, other than overturn the election, fine. But listen, I'm going to read this for you. I'm going to break down what's going on. They sent me an email. I'm going to debunk some of what they say. We're going to challenge Section 230. But let me just tell you right off the bat, I believe this does help Donald Trump. There are certain things that could help him build support. Claims of fraud, for instance, and saying that it changed the outcome and all that stuff could get a lot of people riled up behind him. But I believe that would isolate people and only get Trump his most ardent supporters. Regular people who are watching the news are not as likely to understand or believe these claims about hammers, scorecard, dominion, whatever that stuff is. And I'm not a fan of them either, because for one, they are outlandish. Sure, maybe there's some evidence. I've talked about some of the weird goings-on, like WikiLeaks release from Cablegate. There are some weird things about these voting machines and stuff, but it's delegitimizing Trump's legal challenges to victory. Let me just stop and say this. Texas is suing right now. Texas's lawsuit is not focused on fraud or regularity. It's focused on definitive facts that 4 states changed the rules of their election without going through the state legislature in violation of the Electors Clause. That is a constitutional, legally sound argument that has many Trump supporters cheering because it is legit, it is strong, and many more states want to join in. If you focus the conversation on the unprovable, the esoteric, or to many people, what they would view it as absurd, you lose the argument. Now, just because I think it's going to help Trump doesn't mean what they're doing is good. What YouTube is doing is insane. And I'll tell you why they're doing it. YouTube is trying to remove the likes of channels like mine and many others, and they're trying to go about it slowly enough to where they don't destroy the floor out from under them. They are bleeding users to many other platforms. That's a fact. But I don't know if it's going to be enough to actually upend YouTube's monopoly in the space because of the partner program. But they want to be Netflix. They want to make I shouldn't say Game of Thrones, because there was a time when Game of Thrones was good. They want to make big shows and good shows, and they want a decentralized network to only a certain degree. YouTube wants enough free and independent thought where they get good content rising to the top, but not enough to where people are, say challenging an election. Let me read what they said, and then I'm going to read you the email they actually sent to me. That's right. We got some real journalism here. YouTube writes, over the past weeks and months, we've seen people coming to YouTube to learn more about where and how to vote, or learning more about a candidate or an issue. We've seen news organizations grow their audience, and we've seen people turn to YouTube for the latest election results, or simply to follow an historic event with the highest voting turnout in over a century in the U.S. Our main goal going into the election season was to make sure we're connecting people with authoritative information, while also limiting the reach of misinformation and removing harmful content. The work here is ongoing, and we want to provide an update. Removing content that violates our policies. Now, before I read this, I want to say, YouTube, in my opinion, has long since violated the Good Samaritan provisions of Section 230 and should be able to be sued for defamation and be liable for this. And I'll explain this, and we'll go over Section 230. I'm actually going to show you the law and explain it. Here's what they say. Our community guidelines prohibit spam, scams, or other manipulated media, coordinated influence operations, and any content that seeks to incite violence. Since September, we've terminated over 8,000 channels and thousands of harmful and misleading elections-related videos for violating our existing policies. Over 77% of those removed videos were taken down before they had 100 views. We also work to make sure that the line between what is removed and what is allowed is drawn in the right place. Our policies prohibit misleading viewers about where and how to vote. We also disallow content alleging widespread fraud or errors change the outcome of a historical U.S. presidential election. However, in some cases, that has meant allowing controversial views on the outcome of process of counting votes of a current election as election officials have worked to finalize counts. Yesterday, was the safe harbor deadline for the U.S. presidential election, and enough states have certified their election results to determine a president-elect. Given that, we will start removing any piece of content uploaded today or any time after that misleads people by alleging that widespread fraud or errors changed the outcome of the 2020 U.S. presidential election in line with our approach towards historical U.S. presidential elections. For example, we will remove videos claiming that a presidential candidate won the election due to widespread software glitches or counting errors. We will begin enforcing this policy today and will ramp up in the weeks to come. As always, news coverage and commentary on these issues can remain on our site if there's sufficient education, documentary, scientific, or artistic content. Okay, we can't say widespread fraud, errors, etc. You get the point. Well, I've not asserted that, although there have been, there's a research project that claims mostly my content fall in the category of other. There's supporting Trump's claims of widespread fraud and opposing them, and I'm mostly falling in other. Why? Because if you're just reporting the facts, you're not asserting what is true without evidence. So when Trump says it was rigged or there's widespread voter fraud, I say that has to be proven. My position the entire time has been there's more than enough evidence, signs or indications something may have occurred to warrant an investigation. Short of an actual investigation, I don't know what you expect. I can't come here and tell you something that's not been proven. So, other it is. But here's what I can tell you. Donald Trump did lose the election due to changes made to the voting system over the past year or longer that is in violation of the Electors Clause, as per my opinion, and violates the supreme authority of the state legislatures and how they appoint electors. This is evidenced by actual letters signed by state legislation saying they dispute the results and they seek to reclaim their right to appoint electors. What does it really mean? I gave you kind of the bombastic version. The way I've described it over and over again is that Trump got Ocean's 11'd. People right now think that there was this grand heist of vote switching and all that stuff, and people went in and it's like they're putting on sunglasses and they're palming USBs and stuff. And we've seen some stuff like that, like palming USBs. We don't know why. It appears in some instances to be illegal. It doesn't mean the election was changed because of it. There's a video going around where Trump supporters say they hear a woman say something like, "We're probably going to get caught." They believe that's evidence that she was rigging or the election or something like that. It's possible, but come on. Unless you can do an investigation and get some evidence, she might be saying, the guy might have been like, "Hey, you want to go sneak out and get some pizza?" She goes, "We'll probably get caught." You don't know the context. And that's why I don't make conclusions unless I get hard evidence. Of course, that means many people make predictions more often than I do. And I make predictions, too, based on available evidence and, educated guesses. But a lot of people definitively want to say, one thing is true, I know it. I won't do that. If you don't like it, I'm sorry. That's just me. I'm the milquetoast fence sitter. You get it probably by now. I hope you do. But here's what I can say. If they start getting rid of all the videos that allege fraud and like widespread fraud and error, and all that remains is the Trump supporters saying things like, these states violated the Electors Clause, and we can definitively state they did, we can definitely, I think at this point, it's a fact. I mean, there's no factual basis to argue against it. If the Pennsylvania Republicans passed Act 77, no excuse mail-in voting, it's currently being challenged. I'm not sure how far it's going to go. They say, here's what we expect. They later complained that the courts, the Secretary of State, and the governor added more provisions like extending deadlines and ballot curing, something they never intended. Thus, you can clearly state the state legislature did not pass those provisions, and they were enacted anyway. In many states, we saw things like this, where there was an executive order, say in New Jersey, for instance. Not that New Jersey matters because it's a blue state. It's always going to be blue, at least, or I should say it's predictably blue, very heavy blue. The governor issued an executive order for mail-in voting. That would violate the Electors Clause, but I don't think the New Jersey state legislature actually cares all that much and probably would have agreed with him anyway, so they didn't challenge it. But in some states, there's a conflict. A Democratic governor, and you have a Republican legislature. Well, in that case, the Republican legislatures are saying, we have the right to choose. That right was taken from us. Texas is suing on those grounds, the strongest possible grounds to actually disqualify some states. It's not likely going to happen. I'm not saying Trump's going to win. I don't think so. But I will tell you, what we're seeing right now is YouTube trying to isolate and cut off many prominent channels. Right Side Broadcasting Network, for instance, broke 1 million subs. Well, they're likely going to get the axe. You have Newsmax, for instance, who has just surpassed Fox News in television ratings. They're gone. You see what they're doing? They're isolating and getting rid of the hardcore Trump-supporting platforms on this website. I guess I can get by on the fact that I don't assert things for the most. I'm not perfect. I get things wrong all the time. But I try to avoid asserting things that I don't have definitive proof of. When the Voter Integrity Project came out and said, here's a list of people who voted in more than one state, I say, okay, now we have evidence. That's not definitive proof, but I'll point it out if it exists. And Matt Brainerd has I believe he's provided extensive sworn testimony. So under oath, that's legit evidence, plus hard data. Very serious. Not evidence that the results were changed because of it, but it's evidence that, in my opinion, warrants an investigation. We'll see how close I'm getting to them saying they're going to ban me or remove my content. But here's the email I received. We just shared an update on YouTube's election efforts, including how we're handling community guidelines pertaining to election-related misinformation. Our policies disallow content alleging that widespread fraud or errors change the outcome of a historical U.S. presidential election. We allow this type of commentary for current elections. So I did read this. I'll skip over this part. It's basically what they already said. As such, starting today, we will remove new content uploaded on or after December 9th, alleging that widespread fraud or errors changed the outcome of the 2020 presidential election. For example, very much the same thing, right? It's very similar to what they already said, but here's the important part. If your content is impacted, you'll receive automated emails from our system regarding this content. As we ramp up our enforcement, we'll initially remove violative videos without giving a strike. We will begin issuing strikes for new content uploaded after Inauguration Day, January 20th, 2021. That is the most important bit here. You will not get a strike. They're just removing any and all videos that make those claims. I'm not sure who is making those claims, to be completely honest. Maybe people like Steven Crowder, who I think has gone pretty heavily into these accusations, but I also kind of view, I haven't watched Crowder's videos in entirety. I've seen some clips, but I also think he's not someone who would assert something to be true without, being able to prove it. But again, the main issue here is that, for one, YouTube is wrong. Safe harbor deadline. Let's play a game. They say December 8th was a safe harbor deadline for the U.S. presidential election, and enough states have now certified their election results to determine a president-elect. That is nonsensical in its opinion. If I want to have an opinion, why can't I have one? YouTube doesn't want to be YouTube. It wants to be kind of a elite tube. If you say the things they like, if you don't cross certain boundaries, then you're allowed to be on the platform. They'll promote you or whatever. Certain platforms they don't like the amount of views we've been getting on clips over in the IRL podcast haven't been doing as well because we host people who YouTube isn't a big fan of. That YouTube likes me because there's a lot of reasons. I basically talked about how I'm able to capture enough of the audience that is affected by this without crossing the line, so they tolerate. And in many instances, I actually help promote and appreciate my content. On the IRL podcast, we have guests who they don't like as much, so, we've been getting a little knocked down a peg or two. But that's fine, whatever. I'm going to do my thing, and I'm not super concerned about, them promoting me. I want to show you something. This is the from Congress.gov, breaking down how the election works. January 6th, they say, blah, 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 joint session, 1 p.m., has the results. They say, if one of the tickets has received a majority of 270 or more electoral votes, the vice president announces the results, which, quote, shall be deemed a sufficient declaration of the persons, if any, elected president and vice president. Vice president-elect, president-elect are determined on January 6th. More importantly, I believe they're incorrect because the safe harbor provision says that if a state has enacted procedures to settle controversies, and if these procedures have been applied and the results have been determined 6 days before the electors' meetings, then these results are considered to be conclusive. The problem right now is you have state legislatures openly saying we dispute this. So you can argue, but you can't definitively state. The left is saying